Return of the Exiled, or Why Must I Be the Hero? By Ch9, read by YOB, dedicated to Kurt Reimert, whose stories inspired this work. Requiescat in pace. Chapter 9. Wendy, the Magistrate. After they left Glenfrey, the embarrassment that Smoke's frenzy caused, they camped in a nice little meadow. One of the men came back from foraging to tell Sard that there was a ruined outpost just down the hill from the camp. Smoke was still sleeping, but everyone else decided to go see the ruin. It would be a pleasant diversion. Maybe it would make a nice dry camp. Instead, 7 Grolls came running out of the ruin to attack them. The men formed a line to fight the Grolls, while Dobrina and Tennard stood back to use magic. Wendy stood in front of Tennard to keep the Grolls away. She was watching Sard engage a Groll, hoping to learn more about fighting, when Tennard called out for her attention. A Groll was attacking Tennard. Wendy turned to face the Groll, who wore a fancy gambeson with embroidery work around the buttons. It was far too small for him, and must have been stolen from a woman or youth. She blocked his first slice and tried to stab him under the ribs, but the gambeson thwarted her sword. She blocked again, and George's words came to her. If your enemy swings sunwise, follow his swing and deflect it. If your enemy swings landwise, counter his swing, block, and look for an opening. The Groll swung landwise, and Wendy blocked hard and went for his chest. Getting in a lucky strike, her sword slipped through the opening where the Groll's armor did not close. The Groll and Wendy both looked at each other, startled in disbelief, as her sword passed through his breastbone and heart. Again she heard George's words. Don't let your success leave you vulnerable. Once you have incapacitated the one enemy, reset and look for the next one, because he will be looking for you. She drew out her blade and returned to her ready position while looking for another Groll. The others had defeated all the rest and were now catching their breath. Wendy looked down at the Groll she had killed in wonder. So she was a swordswoman after all. Bud pointed out that she should clean her sword before resheathing it, unless she wanted to smell gore for many days. The rest of the day went by in a pleasant haze as Wendy began to trust herself a little. She even bargained for a tinderbox from the spoils, and got it. She also obtained some leather and metal armor pieces, and contrived to make a makeshift cuirass with vambraces and greaves. From then on, she would join the men at practice each morning. They had fallen into a routine. Smoke would scout ahead and keep them just out of hearing distance from the road. The other 2 gnomes, brothers Filio and Cilio, would take up the rear and ensure that they left minimal evidence of their passing. They would camp a fair distance from the road and any sign of habitation. Dobrina, Tennard, and Wendy would search for edibles while the men set up camp. The return of it blunted their senses, so that they were taken by surprise when, as they neared Sersha's capital city of Pan, the sea patrol quietly surrounded them and took them prisoner. Although they were disarmed, searched, and their hands were bound, they were not treated badly, and the soldiers who took their possessions carefully took notes of to whom each item belonged. It was quite different from how they did things in Riston City. They were taken to a heavily timbered building, where the guards ushered the group into a large room, untied them, and had them wait. The room was well built, but plain, with no windows. Soon a middle-aged man in official robes and a young assistant came in. Both sat at a simple table flanked by 2 more guards. 2 farmers with a disagreement over water rights went up first before they came to Sard and the group. After a brief discussion with the head of the patrol, the elder magistrate looked at Sard and asked him his name and business. Sard gave his name and said that they were a group of farmhands who were in Pan looking for work now that planting season was here. This went down of the line of men, with Wendy and Dobrina and the gnomes being passed over. All the men said that they were looking for work except Tennard, who claimed to be a student sent abroad to inquire about a book. The younger man wrote everything down. The magistrate then asked the group at large if there would be anyone who could vouch for them, as they looked suspicious and had been found armed. "Is it so unreasonable to travel armed?" inquired Sard. Just days ago we were attacked by a pack of Grolls and had to defend ourselves. It is not unreasonable by itself, but combined with your uncouth appearance and numbers, it is reason to be suspicious, replied the magistrate. Wendy worried the situation over a bit and decided that they could either trust this Sersha official or they would be trapped right here. She took a minute to steady her nerves before she could speak. I have a letter of introduction, she said. Will that suffice? A letter of introduction, the man said slowly, as if he were having some difficulty with the words. From whom? Irina of House Spoven, replied Wendy. That would be interesting, to say the least, the magistrate said with raised eyebrows. Where is this letter? In a parcel in my pack, said Wendy. The guards should still have it. The man signaled one of the guards, and the parcel Wendy's mother had sent with her was brought to him. He broke the seal, sorted through the contents, and pulled out the letter describing who Wendy was, her lineage. He also studied the ring her mother had included. Sard and the men were openly staring at Wendy, while Dobrina and Tennert looked at each other with eyes wide with surprise. The magistrate's young assistant pulled out some of the other papers in the parcel and began reading through them. In moments he was frantically signaling his superior and pointing to the piece of paper he held. The magistrate glanced over from the letter of introduction to the list of testimonies, and his eyes widened. This is the purpose of your mission, I take it? He inquired. Yes, said Wendy. I'm supposed to take it to Prince Frederick in Luffa. I was hoping my Uncle Randon could help me. Yes, if General Randon were here, I'm certain that he would insist on escorting you to Luffa. As it is, we would like to have a scribe make copies of these documents and present them to His Royal Highness and the Kings of Tuden, Bokenshire, Thanet, and Ur. Would you allow this? He asked as he took the paper and some others from his assistant. My mother is afraid that would lead to bloodshed, replied Wendy. Perhaps you might make copies and hold them here in Sersha until Prince Frederick can make plans regarding them. I see the wisdom in your words, but it will be difficult to keep news of this evidence secret for long unless we have something exciting going on, answered the official. More exciting than dead wandering our streets, I mean. Smoke piped up that he had documents that might serve to excite the people for a while. The magistrate looked over at the gnome and asked, What documents might you have that could compare with these? He gestured to the papers in his hand. Smoke kept the military documents he had stolen in a secret pocket of his tunic and was able to produce them for the magistrate. A frowning guard snatched them from Smoke and handed them to the younger man, and he handed them to his senior. It's called the Burger Plan, said Smoke. After a moment's reading over the documents, the senior's officials went even wider than seemed possible, and he demanded, Where did you get these? His voice squeaked a little. They were found in Baron Gettelfurg's carriage, replied Smoke, in Thai. I am not familiar with this Baron Gettelfur, said the magistrate. What were you doing in his carriage? Hiding from thugs, replied Smoke. Thai is a rough town. In a way, this was true, although he had been going to burglarize the Baron's home. The man looked at him for a long moment and stood up. Do not stir or speak until I return, he commanded, and stepped out of the room. While he was out, Wendy had time for her mind to catch up. Why would the magistrate ask her if his copying her mother's documents was acceptable? Was she not under his authority? And what did Smoke have that brought such an intense reaction? The magistrate's assistant was reading over the rest of Wendy's papers and kept looking up at her. Did they know that the gnomes were responsible for the ghost that had been set loose in Glenfrey? She was nervous and a little distraught, but kept herself still, waiting for the official to return. Cilio and Filio, whispering behind her, only increased her nervousness. The magistrate returned a few minutes later with a man in very rich robes and silks who looked over Smoke's documents and said simply, Pay him whatever he wants and send copies of these to King Geoffrey of Tuden, King Thoril of Luffa, with best haste. You will see me later when all is done." And he left with scarcely even looking at the group. The magistrate, having lost his official demeanor, sat down visibly sweating, and asked Smoke, "So what do you want?" The following morning, better fed, clothed, better equipped, and with silver and even some gold in their pockets, the group was once again on their way to Luffa, now with 5 men at arms to protect their mission, courtesy of King Buford. With Thard and his men, they had 16 fighting men as an escort for the parcel Windy was delivering to Prince Frederick. Windy was now an object of respect, and Smoke was well thanked and treated to much camaraderie that he had been missing until now. Tennard and Debrina told Windy that they knew of the House Spoven and were surprised that there were still living members. It was generally believed that when Lord Harold of Spoven had been burned in his manor, that the whole family had ceased to exist. After Scribes had copied them, they had returned all the papers in her parcel, as well as the ring. The younger official kept looking at her in a way that puzzled Windy, almost as if she intimidated him, maybe because of the local reputation of her uncle. The senior official had left as soon as Smoke told him what the documents he carried would cost. Everything he had asked for was provided, though, so they must have found tremendous value in those papers. Debrina had acquired a set of shiny chainmail, the most expensive thing asked for, with a cloak, and looked impressive. Tennard had consented to wear a boiled leather cuirass, but no more. "I am a student of wisdom, not warfare." Windy still wore the same leather armor that she had won from the Grolls, but had been cleaned, boiled, and professionally refitted, while missing brass rings and other parts had been replaced. Several men had rid themselves of the conglomerate armor they had from the Grolls and replaced it with good quality padded gambesons. Cilio and Filio had opted for larger packs. Much better. Oddly, Tennard spent a lot of time inquiring in small bookstores. Surely he did not mean to carry on a selection of books on their journey. But he purchased none, and Windy was left to wonder about his behavior. A mage's curiosity, she supposed. A new problem emerged. With their new wealth came beggars. Windy was buying some new clothes when a small, ragged girl appeared and asked for a few coppers. Windy had given her 2 coppers, and Riff had shooed her away. Smoke stepped in front of her with a small boy's arm in his hand. From the little boy's grubby fingers dangled Windy's coin pouch. "When in a big city, always keep one hand on your pouch, or you will soon not have one," said Smoke. Windy took back her pouch and scolded the boy, who seemed immune to her words, and disappeared as soon as Smoke released his arm. Windy reminded herself again that she had much to learn. More beggars followed them as they re-equipped themselves and bought supplies. Smoke told them that every city had beggars, and they would have to get used to them. Windy asked why they did not go to work on the farms for their sustenance, and Sard pointed out that most of them were children or the sickly. Bud pointed out that some of the beggars looked more drunk than sickly. Smoke agreed that some beggars were more truthful than others, while some were as much thieves as beggars. A tough lesson learned. The group was enjoying the security of their numbers and some of the wine the gnomes had bought. Windy avoided the wine. A dinner of venison and dried apples put them all in a good mood. While the men were busy eating and telling stories, Sard sat to talk with Windy, although keeping a respectful distance, and asked her, "So your name is Windy of House Spoven, eh? I never would have guessed. Military men hold your Uncle Randon in highest regard. And what are those papers we are delivering to a prince in Luffa, or should I not ask?" "It is the responsibility and burden of my family," replied Windy. "I knew nothing of it until I was to leave home." This reminded her of another question. "You said that planting season was here. Don't you mean harvesting? It was just past midsummer when I left, and I don't think we were in that dungeon for very long." "You miscount the days of travel," answered Sarv. "Those farm hands that left us were taken when they came into town with their harvest, and the rains that fell on us when we were traveling to the coast were the winter rains. The innkeeper in the Crossroads village we visited asked me if we were looking for work for planting season, as the local farmers would be needing additional hands." "But I saw no snow. How could winter have passed?" asked Windy. We have been traveling south of Riston, where it seldom snows, answered Sard. They just get cold rains here in the southern territories. Wendy swallowed and digested the knowledge that she had been gone from home for more than half a year. Without the activities of the farm to mark off time, she had poorly noticed its passing. Would she ever see her family again? How were her aging parents? What about George and Rhoda? She had to push such thoughts from her mind, as the need of the moment was far more important, and the burden of homesickness would only make her journey more difficult. The papers I carry prove that my uncle was acting not out of treason, but loyalty to King Leopold, she told Sard. They also prove that someone other than General Lord Thalen murdered the king. As well, they show that Prince Frederick of Tor survived and is living in Luffa. That is where I must go and give these to him. Great God of the underworld, said Sard. This would upset the whole kingdom. What will happen now? That depends on Prince Frederick and what he can do, answered Wendy. I must get to Luffa. Sard and Wendy talked for a while, and he bid her good night and left to check on the men standing watch. Tennard also stopped by to chat on his way to bed. He had indulged in some of the wine and needed to sleep it off. Dobrina, too, had gone to bed early, so Wendy found her blanket and lay down to sleep. Back on the farm, she would struggle to fall asleep. Now she could sleep anywhere and fell asleep instantly. The road to Luffa led through Brokenshire. Attempting to bypass some rough terrain, they passed their path along the King's Road that went through Thanet and then down the river Tenegor to the coast. Traders in Pad had said that there were good roads along this way, although highwaymen and goblins would be everywhere come summer. Once they reached the coast, they hoped to find a boat going to Luffa, which lay some miles off the coast of Brokenshire. But they were hardly 2 days out of Pan when they came on a group of youths being attacked by ragged, smelly, human-like creatures. Zombies! Yelled Dobrina and leapt to the attack on the smelly things. Wendy had never heard of zombies and held back, trying to understand what was happening. Sard, Riff, and one of the men-at-arms stood by Wendy, while most of the men followed Dobrina into the fray. 3 men stood ready, facing in different directions against surprise rush from unseen foes. The fight lasted only minutes, as the zombies retreated from Dobrina and 2 of the youths, who presented the symbols of their faith, an ankh for Dobrina, and 1 youth, a crux for the other youth. The men-at-arms quickly dismembered the zombies that had fallen, while the leader of the small group thanked them and introduced himself as Tonner of Paden, a village in the mountains a few weeks' journey north of there. He and his companions were seeking an ancient symbol of Paden Khan, in the hopes that it would save their village from the masses of undead that plagued them. Although he and the youth called Hefted were priests of the Church of the One True God, Tanner used the Ankh symbol because of his ancestor, the Khan. The Paden Khan was a priest of Hathor and developed the powerful symbols for turning the undead. Each symbol was specifically blessed for one type of undead, although weaker undead would flee from any of them. Tanner's other companions included Groton, a blue-forged dwarf, Dram, an aspiring magician, Teriel, a young fighting man with 2 light swords, and Stobert, a muscular farmer who was learning to use his sword. One of the men-at-arms, a man called Cobble, confirmed that the area north was experiencing an upsurge in undead attacks, and that many soldiers were spread out attempting to eliminate this scourge. Paden was well away in the north Thanet, and one of the many villages that were too remote for regular forces to cover, especially as Thanet was short on fighting men. Dobrina suggested that they join forces as far as Luffa. Maybe King Thuril could help Tanner with his quest. At least both groups could benefit from the increased numbers. Sard was less welcoming, but admitted that if undead were roaming the land, larger numbers and additional priests would be beneficial. The men-at-arms just shrugged and said there seemed to be no getting away from battling the undead. At least this mission was more exciting than just patrolling city streets. Tanner liked the idea, but the next clue on his list of challenges led back north towards mountain country. He showed it to Dobrina and Tennard in the hopes that one of them could help him understand it better. Through Demon's horns you'll see his crown, the secret mountain king. By hidden way you'll take your path, but do not touch a thing. 'Tween forked beard you'll find his mouth, or tongue and lips and teeth. Upon the ice a coffin lid. Can you read what lies beneath? Although it sounded like a reference to some dwarf lord, his research had not revealed the identity of the secret mountain king to Tanner. But by chance one of the men-at-arms, a man named Puck, knew of a mountain referred to in old tales as the Demon's Horns because of its two divergent peaks. Since they had made the offer, Wendy's group accompanied Tanner and his group to the distant mountain. Sard had to tell Cilio and Filio to stop playing Make the Head Talk with one of the zombie heads and get back to scouting the road ahead. It was going to be a long journey.